Yesterday, we talked about the 4 neural systems that are enhanced by mindfulness. And today, we're going to talk about the art and science of mindful listening. I usually run this as a 2-hour workshop, and we have 30 minutes. But you are all advanced, so we can go through this faster, hopefully. Yesterday, people gave me feedback that I didn't introduce how to say my name. So I'm from Vietnam. I was born there. And my name reads Quach. But the Vietnamese say Zway Kwok. Jedi mind trick. I don't expect you to speak Vietnamese, so I respond to do. It's okay. And so as Dory said, I present on the neuroscience of mindfulness for the CWMF program. I myself have been teaching a neuroscience-informed version of mindfulness since 2013 when I started Calm Clarity. So back then, I was trying to figure out how do we deliver a program for inner city students dealing with all these challenges to understand how their brain works and how mindfulness can help them develop that awareness of what's happening in their brain. And so I saw that as a leadership and life skills training program. And since then, we've evolved. And a lot of what you're about to see with mindful listening, it's really the test of how deep your practice is. Can you actually listen and feel what someone else is experiencing? And this is so important because I was born in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, a war that started because Americans wouldn't listen to the Vietnamese and what they really wanted, forcing them to fight for it, right? We escalate unnecessarily because we don't listen to each other. I grew up in inner city Philadelphia where little boys I played with became dehumanized and people stopped listening to them and they called them super predators. And with mass incarceration, they were locked up. It is really important that you learn how to listen to another human being, that people learn to listen to you. You understand what's involved with listening. And so I worked in Asia from 2006 to 2011, and I was able to take some time off and try to understand what mindfulness is. Why did my ancestors care about this? I went to Dharamsala and visited this Buddhist pilgrimage sites, trying to make sense of who this historical figure was. And I'm not a religious person, but for me, neuroscience provides a Rosetta Stone for making sense of why these practices change us. They're doing something to your brain. And thanks to the work of Richie Davidson in this field called contemplative neuroscience, there are studies that tell you which parts of your brain activate or deactivate as you do these practices, and over time, what's getting stronger. So now we can actually tell whether someone's practicing in a way that's leading to benefit, or when there's misunderstanding, where the practices aren't actually doing what they're supposed to, right? That's powerful. And so my book, Calm Clarity, was one of Fast Company's best business books of 2018, which is a big win for someone from inner city Philadelphia. And then in 2019, there was this documentary about meditation as a portal for transformation called The Portal, and I was lucky to be selected as one of the people they featured. So for me, mindfulness is one means of self-actualization. There's a lot involved with self-actualization. It's not the only thing, but it helps you get there. And so talking about mindful listening, can any of you tell when someone is really listening to you? Who thinks you can tell? Is it because it's obvious when they're distracted? Right? But there are signs that someone's listening to you. You're intuitively telling that someone is listening to you when someone isn't, right? Even they go, you know they're watching football. You know they're not listening to you, right? And so what's going on so that you can actually tell? So for some reason, this is okay. Listening has been a challenge for thousands of years, right? So Epictetus, one of the famous Stoic philosophers, said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. So even back then, you had this issue, people talking over each other, right? And then more recently, Stephen Covey said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. You're trying to win an argument, right? Show that you're smarter than that person, prove yourself, get validated. And then George Bernard Shaw quipped, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion it has taken place. Have you ever thought you were simpatico about something? Then you went off and did your thing and you realized the other person completely misunderstood what you said? My partner and I do that all the time, right? And we have to let's loop back and are we really sure we're saying the same thing or not? And words mean different things if you're an intercultural couple. I think the word means this. He thinks it means that. We argue. Apparently, I did not know what a BLT was until he showed me. No, that's not. So, one cause of poor listening, it's your autopilot, this part of the brain that's responsible for the inner narrator, diverting your attention and hijacking the conversation. Have you ever experienced an inner narrator kind of being like, why is this person saying this? Why is this so boring? Or whatever it is, right? Or the person's talking about their grandmother, and all of a sudden, your associative activation cascade starts thinking about your grandmother. Someone talked about a car accident they were in. You thought about the car accident you were in. Someone talked about a horrible breakup, and you thought about your horrible breakups, right? Doesn't mean you were trying to be a bad listener, but then you want to share your story. And then your monkey mind says, that happened to me too. What a nightmare, blah, blah, blah. And all this judgment comes in, or you get swept away with your story, and that person never gets to complete their story. I mean, that happened to you when you were the one speaking, and you never got to tell your story? Or you were the one who was listening, but then you never fully heard the other person's story? Raise your hand. Have you experienced this? Right? So again, non-intentional. You just have an autopilot. Your default mode network can't help but do this. And so this is where it's important to understand the neuroscience of this. So the 4 systems enhanced by mindfulness are talked about in the book Altered Traits by Daniel Goleman and by Amishi Jha in her book Peak Mind. So the first system is the attention system. And just by the sound of it, it's like, are you even paying attention to what they're saying? And if you're just watching football, you're not listening, of course, there is no listening, right? So this is your ability to direct, focus, sustain your attention, to concentrate, to not get distracted, right? Very important system. The next system is the meta-awareness system. Are you observing and being aware of what your inner narrator is doing? Its stories, feelings, thoughts, behaviors that come up, patterns that you have. If someone brings up a story about failure, you get uncomfortable because you then say, why did you fail, right? And you start judging, right? And you want to fix their problems, right? And so then there's the resilience system. What about the story? What happens when the story is triggering and you start escalating? Can you even listen anymore? Are you shutting down? Can you ground yourself in the present moment so you're not shutting down? A lot of couples can't communicate because one party is shutting down, right? And so how do you learn to recover and bring blood flow back to your brain? Mindfulness is a way of staying part of the present moment, right? And not getting completely flooded and overwhelmed. And then there's the connection system. So this is your ability to attune, to experience compassion and empathy, to give and receive social support, so to interact in a humanizing way rather than a dehumanizing way. Does that make sense? These are really important systems, and I now want to talk more about the connection system, because you can't listen if you don't understand how your connection system is helping you. So the connection system, and I don't know if Alicia is still here, he kind of helped set up this when he talked about social interactions. The connection system enables us to give and receive social support, expand our perspective, and build fulfilling relationships. Doesn't that sound really important? Wouldn't you want all your children, all your students to have that, right? And so there are components to it. There's what people call the compassion system. This research comes out of Tanya Singer's lab in Germany. And some people call that the tend to befriend system, but this system motivates you to alleviate another person's suffering. You say, how can I help? What can I do? Right? A lot of nonprofits rely on this system to motivate you to take action. And then there's the mirror neuron system, where you're picking up another person's emotions, and often their distress. And in healthcare settings and settings where there's a lot of trauma, it can lead to empathy fatigue, where there's so much distress and you just feel overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, right? And so you need to be able to regulate yourself when that happens. And that's the resilience system. And then there's the mentalizing system. Can you imagine another person's perspectives and intentions, especially when they're not like yours, without dismissing them? And the best way to develop the system is through fiction, right? But kids aren't born with the mentalizing system fully developed. It starts to kick in adolescence, but if you ask a 6-year-old to imagine what a 10-year-old is feeling, they can't do it. They only know what they're feeling, right? So the research shows this comes later in life. And unfortunately, men, you're at a disadvantage. Women do this better. Their brains do this better, right? It's been tested. And so, but on top of these systems is your meta-awareness system, helping you see, am I able to have empathy right now? And if not, what's going on? What stories are keeping me from seeing this person as a human being worth listening to? Because the sooner you think of this kid as, that's just a bad kid. He's just a monster. Does it matter now what his perspective is? Right? The moment you dehumanize someone, or you accept that someone tells you someone's a monster or an animal, you have permission now to turn the system off and disconnect. That's a really important thing to be aware of. So if there's a checklist, you have to say, okay, how's my compassion system right now? How's my mirror neuron system? Am I able to experience people's emotions? And how's my mentalizing system? Do I care what their story is? And you'll find that when you're burned out, you're overwhelmed, you're tired, you're exhausted, you cannot connect. Your vagal tone plunges. So you do have to practice self-care and have good resilience before you can listen, right? You can't be available to mindfully listen 24/7. You got to be aware of when you have the capacity to and when these systems aren't working. So you say, I'm exhausted. Can you give me 30 minutes and I'll come back and try to listen to you, right? Whatever it is, maybe it's tomorrow. You don't need to be available 24/7 to listen to everybody's problems if you're not a therapist getting paid for this, right? And even therapists need time off. They got burned out and overwhelmed too during the pandemic. But does this help you understand what's going on in your brain? That there's these important components of listening? And so then we translate this to the neurobiology of listening. There are biological structures that are involved, right? So just to hear sounds, it's your ear structure, your eardrums, your auditory nerves. Then just to pay attention, your attention system, especially the salience network that tells you what's important, is kicking in. Your resilience system's helping you focus that attention if you get escalated. Your meta-awareness system is aware that things are distracting and you're redirecting your attention. Your connection system's helping you feel more of that person's story and being and energy and all of that, right? Now, then there's verbal comprehension. You can listen to someone, but they're speaking a foreign language. You have no clue what they're saying, right? Sometimes you can tell. I think he's pissed off, right? Like there are things you could tell when you have no idea you're watching a movie with subtitles, right? So without the language ability, it goes into your auditory cortex, but there's no verbal comprehension, right? So it has to go through your language networks. And then there's emotional perception. And this is where the amygdala kicks in and helps you tell, like, okay, this person's emotions are X, Y, or Z. Are they a threat or not? Is it still safe, right? And most of the time, when you're safe, they'll let you know that you're safe to care. But some people, when they're escalated, they then think that person's a threat, and they just start escalating too, right? Then there's the mirror neuron system, which we'll talk to about a little bit more. There's your interoceptive system that helps you feel what's happening in your body. And based on your sensations, because they're contagious, sometimes you feel like my stomach got tight. Maybe their stomach is tight. Maybe they're stressed, right? So you're catching what's going on in their body sometimes if you allow yourself to. And so there's all these parts of you that are trying to make sense of what they're experiencing emotionally because you're experiencing something emotionally as you listen to them, right? Including your body map, the insula with the anterior cingulate cortex, a bunch of brain parts you don't have to memorize, but just know there's parts that process emotion. And then there's parts that process interpretation and response, right? And I would say it's your entire embodied brain that's doing this, not just this part here, but it's interconnected to your heart, to your tummy, to your gut, right? Throughout your entire body, your legs will get tight, your arm will get tight or open or relax. You feel those sensations. You kind of know if you're getting hot or cold, right? So these things are happening, and those four systems are helping you be attuned. Make sense? Now, the mirror neuron system is critical because they let you intuit what people are doing and feeling contagiously just by picking it up. And this is called unintentional mimicry. You might not do it on purpose. People with hyper empathy don't know how to shut this off, right? But it's building neural resonance if you allow it to. It can be a superpower. And so when we talk about neural resonance, it happens when you're reading fiction. It happens when you're reading a memoir. It happens when you're watching a movie, right? So there's a speaker or protagonist, and you have similar brain activity. And so you're processing whatever the speaker is going through in the same area of the brain as your own experiences. So when you're watching what's happening, Luke Skywalker, for instance, you feel like it's happening to you, right? Or The Princess Bride, or whatever your favorite movie is. And so, when you notice friends are finishing each other's sentences, that's only possible because of neural resonance activating very similar networks in the brain and the same language circuits. And then they'll be like, that's the word. Have you experienced that? Right? You're kind of simpatico. So you can intentionally build neural resonance with another person by practicing mindful listening. What you need to do is activate present moment sensory awareness using your senses to attune to the speaker. So most of the time, your primary senses will be hearing, seeing, feeling, sensing, touching. If it makes sense, I date a chef. So smell and taste sometimes matter because we're tasting food, right? So whatever makes sense. And then be aware of how your mirror neuron system may be mirroring their feelings, emotions, and body language. And then as neural resonance forms, it enables you to attune with the speaker and intuit what they're expressing verbally as well as non-verbally. And a lot of times when you're listening, you're like, I got what you said verbatim. There's like, but you had no idea what I was trying to say. You can repeat it back to me, but you didn't get the point, right? And the nonverbal stuff is so important because that's when you figure out they're being sarcastic. They meant the opposite of what they said, right? And so being someone who's an immigrant where English is a second language, sarcasm was really hard to learn. It took a long time to be like, they did not mean that. And then I have this problem where because I'm such a nerd, I take words literally to the point where as like an immigrant, I could get it 800 in the SAT verbal. So I'm that literal sometimes. And people get really frustrated because I'm like, what does that word mean? So you have to be willing to go with the flow and be like, I think you said this, but you really meant that, right? And they go, yes, that's what I meant. Have you ever had that experience? Where you're talking to someone whose English isn't so good, but you were able to guess what they were trying to say? That's really important. And so when we talk about mirroring, you can mirror emotions and body language, right? And so if you practice, like in communications, they talk about like looping, mirroring and looping. So someone shares a story with you, you can deepen neural resonance by mirroring their emotions and body language back to them. in a way that affirms their experience and supports them to more deeply process their emotions. Therapists do this, okay? Coaches do this. So there's many ways to mirror, a lot of ways. You probably already do it. But these are two examples. You name an emotion you felt as they shared about the experience. You asked them to confirm if they felt that emotion. So as you spoke about blah, 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 I felt a sense of happiness, joy, stress, anxiety, whatever it is, bittersweetness. Is that what you felt? And then they can fill in the blank, right? Or you share an observation about their body language. So as you talked about that experience, I noticed your face light up, your shoulders slumped, your jaws clenched, right? And then you can ask them to confirm. Did you notice that? Any chance you want to reflect on what you were feeling? I'd be happy to listen, right? There's no one way of doing it. Whatever language makes sense. Wouldn't speak the same way to a 5-year-old as a 15-year-old, right? You would change it, right? And so I do want to include time for a exercise. And anyone who's sitting alone, if you raise your hand, try to see if you can find a partner. So the mindful listening guidelines is that you set an intention to open your heart and mind and have compassion for yourself and for the speaker. You try to maintain your attention on what the speaker is saying verbally and your awareness on what the speaker is expressing non-verbally. You try to listen with all your senses to build neural resonance, but your attention might wander. So you bring your attention back to the speaker. You tune in to be aware of whatever feelings, emotions, sensations you might pick up through your mirror neuron system as you listen. And then something funny, interesting happens. Your default mode network gets activated because of the speaker talking and you're listening to it. But try not to let it hijack the conversation. You might notice your inner narrator wants to give advice, fix their problems, share related experiences you had, make judgments, or simply free associate, and mine sometimes just completely blanks out, okay? Allow these thoughts and impulses and associations to arise and pass away without verbalizing them, right? And so for the practice, I wanted to give each of you, maybe might be just a minute to talk now. So pair up with a partner. Partner A, choose who partner A is, will speak. Partner B will mindfully listen and mirror. So in the first round, partner A will share a story, let's say about a minute now, because we're running short on time, about a change you tried to make, whether it was successful or not. Partner B will listen mindfully with all your senses. And then after partner A is done speaking, we'll give you some time to mirror back something you felt partner A expressed. And then you ask partner A to confirm, is that what you felt? Is that clear? So we'll do one round, and then partner A shares what they felt, and then we'll switch roles. Okay? So I'm going to go to my stopwatch. Raise your hand if you felt you were able to experience neural resonance through this mindful listening exercise. So some people felt it, most people felt it. How would you describe the sense of connection you feel with your partner? Any words you want to pop out? In sync? Safe? Comforting? Heard? Empathy? In sync? Relatable? Right? So this person might have been a total stranger to you. How do you feel about them now? Family? That's great. Right? So these are the signs you achieved some sense of resonance, right? And so do you feel seen and heard and cared about now? Right? Your whole being, do you feel more open and relaxed now than you did before? It's so important, right? And so I want to ask, what stood out to you by being able to do this? Any quick thoughts?
One-on-one is different than trying to do it in a group.
Okay, one-on-one is different.
Just noticing my brain I forget which system it is, but both inserting my own story and wanting to immediately share that was a very powerful urge.
Mm-hmm. So realizing there is this urge to take over that you can resist. Yes?
Just having the intention to listen really makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. So setting that intention up front changes it.
I think how easy it was to kind of feel that person's emotions and kind of.
How easy it is once you allow your attention to do that. How easy and effortless, because these are built in. I didn't have to rewire you to make you be able to do this. I just have to remind you to turn these systems on.
I found it very difficult when the two people are in the exact same occupation, have the exact same background, and the exact same thought processes. That you're almost instantly, even if you're trying to listen, you're still in the same mindset that they're in. So you can't, it's hard to say, am I in my mindset or am I in their mindset?
So we can talk more about that. So, but I'm getting the thing that I need to finish. So, so these are books we recommend if you want to understand more about how your brain works. And my book is being sold out there. If you ever want me to sign it, I'd be happy to. And just a reminder, like this is a workshop that normally takes at least 2 hours. So you got a 30-minute version of this. So be humble. If you think you've mastered this, you haven't. And so if any of you want to continue a conversation, that's my email address. Find me on LinkedIn. Find me here. And again, I'd be happy to sign your book. So thank you for your attention.